He was a once-in-a-generation genius, pushing the fusion of martial arts and mecha to the absolute limit. Yet in the end, only half of his skull remained. Ambushed by thousands of interstellar warships deep in space, he was all but destroyed. As a perfect blend of man and machine, he tore through enemy lines like a god of war. Even when surrounded by concentrated fire, he deflected every blast with nothing but a wooden staff. Not even colossal warships could withstand a single strike from his blade. But just when victory was within reach, the enemy unleashed a force beyond his comprehension. A power so overwhelming, it broke through even his defenses. In the next instant, crack, his mech began to shatter. When he opened his eyes again, 200 years had passed. His name was Xiang Shan, and at this moment, he had no idea that only half of his skull remained. It wasn't until an old man and a kid told him the truth that he finally understood. But that wasn't even the worst part. He couldn't remember anything, couldn't think, and even basic communication had become nearly impossible. The real problem was that the support systems on the side of his bio-brain were completely fried, leaving the old man utterly stunned. He quickly turned to the boy beside him and asked, "Where the hell did you dig up this thing?" As it turned out, the kid had been scavenging the battlefield scrapyard like he always did. But this time, he discovered a new soft tissue zone buried deep beneath the wreckage. And that's where he found Xiang Shan, barely clinging to life. When he noticed the man's eyeball still moving ever so slightly, he jumped with joy on the spot and swore to fix this broken guy and make him his brand new dad. Turns out, the boy had grown up without a father, and to fill that void, he'd already adopted several dads over the years. This time, he was determined not to be mocked by the other kids again, so he brought Xiang Shan home. The old man with a glass dome over his brain was the mayor of the scrapyard town, and the boy's name was Yuki. They lived in the ruins of a biochemical war era, a wasteland where everyone survived by scavenging trash. And if there was nothing left to scavenge, then people simply sold parts of their own bodies. Over time, the entire town became a grotesque shadow of humanity. To make things easier, the mayor casually gave Xiang Shan a new name, Yorg. But the moment he heard it, Xiang Shan felt something was off. The name stirred something in his memory. He knew it meant something, but it definitely wasn't his. As he passed out again, Yuki rushed to his side and shouted, "Dad." Xiang Shan was completely baffled. "Wait, I have a son." The mayor chuckled and stepped in to explain the situation. Just then, a mechanical click echoed as a surveillance camera suddenly extended from a corner. It scolded Yuki furiously for dragging home a dead man's head. Yuki lowered his voice and mumbled, "Sorry, Mom." That one word, "Mom," left Xiang Shan utterly dumbfounded. Did he just call a camera Mom? But that wasn't her actual body. Her true form was a heavily modified, beat-up old truck. Her name was Yulia. To feed her 7 kids, she had sold off her cerebellum and brainstem, converting herself into a 100-ton construction machine. Even so, she couldn't protect them all, for had died from illness, and one had been taken away as a so-called gene tax. Hearing the mayor explain all this, Xiang Shan felt a surge of indescribable emotion, grief, disbelief, perhaps even guilt. In his memory, humanity was never supposed to end up like this. The mayor seemed to sense his thoughts and interrupted calmly. "Forget Yulia. You're the real anomaly here. This scrapyard was unearthed 50 years ago, and the bio-war happened even earlier. No living brain cell should have survived this long." Seeing Xiang Shan's current state, the mayor realized there was no way he could get any clear answers from him. So he pulled out an old CPU from the 2050s and slotted it straight into Xiang Shan's skull. As the system began to slowly update and initialize, BZZZT, his vision finally started to sharpen and stabilize. Bits and pieces of his memories began to flicker back into his mind. He still couldn't recall everything, but one thing he was absolutely certain of: the name Yor belonged to his sworn enemy. The next morning, Yuki brought him a basic prosthetic body with a pair of mechanical arms. With hands of his own again, Xiang Shan could finally move around on his own. So he followed Yuki to the outskirts of town to the foot of a strange tree known as the copper sugar tree. As the name suggested, this tree oozed a liquid resembling copper lace syrup, one of the most vital resources for the junkyard town survival. Every day, designated workers came to harvest the copper syrup from the tree. Shockingly, it served as the main food source for the people of this era. Without thinking too much, Xiang Shan took a sip straight from the ladle. But the moment it touched his tongue, he knew something was seriously wrong. How could any human possibly drink something like liquid copper? On top of that, all the trees were gray? Was he losing his mind? Or had the entire world already gone mad? What kind of evolution could twist reality into this? What the hell happened to this world? Just then, Yuki interrupted his thoughts. He tugged on Xiang Shan's arm and led him toward a towering mountain of trash in the distance. Yuki started by strapping a dented kettle to Xiang Shan's cracked skull as makeshift head armor. Then he dug up a bunch of junkyard parts, prepping to assemble a crude, prosthetic body. Watching the transformation, Yuki practically sparkled with excitement. Going from half a head to a full mech body? That was seriously cool. Xiang Shan, on the other hand, wasn't having it. Seriously? A freaking teapot on my head? Still, having hands again made life a lot easier. At least now, he could tweak the prosthetics himself. The arm was old and a bit clunky, sure, but it was better than nothing. His eyes, though, those are premium gear. Not only could they autofocus perfectly, but the zoom range was downright ridiculous. With just a bit of adjustment, he could clearly see objects miles away. But before he could finish admiring his ultravision, a sudden shock wave slammed into him, sending him flying. As he turned and squinted, he saw it clearly. It was Enoch. Enoch shrugged with mock indifference. "You're just too small. I didn't even notice you." But when he saw Xiang Shan's patched-up body, he burst into mocking laughter. Xiang Shan narrowed his eyes. "So what? You got a crush on Yulia. What's that got to do with me?" Hearing that name made Enoch explode. "You junkyard reject don't even deserve to say her name." With that, he lunged forward again, ready to attack. But Xiang Shan was already running calculations in his head. If he dove into the tire stack 1 second before impact, Enoch wouldn't have enough time to turn. Then, if he grabbed the rotating shaft and used vibration torque to loosen the main bolts, Enoch would collapse like a pile of spare parts. Damn, I really am a genius. But just as he was preparing to move, a blueprint suddenly lit up in his vision. Enoch's entire structural layout appeared before his eyes. Enoch saw him frozen in place and smirked. If it weren't for the Dyson rule banning murder, you'd already be a pile of scrap metal. With one final taunt, Enoch spun around and disappeared in a cloud of dust. All that remained for poor Xiang Shan was a thick blast of engine fumes to the face. Staring after him, Xiang Shan mumbled, "The Dyson rule. What even is that? And who made it? More importantly, who's really in control of this world? And the gene tax the mayor mentioned, who's collecting that?" Yuki didn't seem too interested. Whoever made those rules is probably way above our pay grade. But hey, I'm more curious about you. Don't tell me you're one of those Paralympic champions. Xiang Shan blinked in confusion. Paralympics? In this era, the so-called Paralympics had evolved into a global gladiator tournament, where cyber-enhanced warriors clashed for glory in the biggest sporting event of the age. Xiang Shan was totally lost, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information being thrown at him. In Xiang Shan's fragmented memories, true martial arts wasn't just about flashy moves. It hinged on mastering powerful internal energy techniques. Yuki's eyes lit up. "Then maybe you used to be a Shaka." In this world, Shaka referred to one of the most feared militant factions. They worshipped a dark deity named MOD and took inspiration from a long-dead rebel named Aaron Swartz, seeking to destroy civilization and rebuild it in their own twisted image. Xiang Shan frowned. "Based on the fragments in my head, I might have been one of them." Yuki didn't push for answers. "Well, whoever you were, let's focus on getting you some decent parts for your lower half. You're hands down the most pitiful bot I've ever seen. Only half a head's original, the rest all cobbled together from junkyard trash." Even Yuki and the mayor stood in silence, staring at his shaky, makeshift frame. Ugly and useless. And who the heck uses solid steel rods for joints? The thing looks like it'll snap just from sneezing. But Xiang Shan didn't seem to mind at all. He started moving his new limbs, every motion creaking with metallic groans. And he actually looked kind of proud. The mayor looked at Xiang Shan and immediately panicked. Don't tell me he's about to go rogue on us. But Xiang Shan simply raised his head and gave them a polite, if not incredibly awkward smile. Yuki blinked. Yes, something's definitely not right with your wiring. The mayor finally let out a sigh of relief. At least we got your body patched up before the tax officers arrive. Every settlement is required to hand over newborns annually as part of the so-called gene tax, a system meant to preserve the human genome. If a town fails to pay up, they're stripped of government protection, left to fend for themselves. And when that happens, the Shaka, those violence-worshipping maniacs, swoop in and turn the town into a bloodbath. Xiang Shan was stunned. Isn't that just straight-up extortion? Glancing down at his ragtag body, he clenched his fists. No matter what, he couldn't let this town suffer because of him. As that thought crossed his mind, 3 aircrafts thundered into view above them, casting long shadows across the town below. Rows of snow-white robots descended from the aircraft, each equipped with overhead surveillance units and armed to the teeth. Moments later, a towering man in military uniform strode forward, a vicious-looking dog on a leash by his side. The mayor quickly stepped up with a forced smile. This was clearly the man's first time visiting the town. But the moment their eyes met, the mayor felt an overwhelming pressure that nearly crushed his breath. His legs buckled, and he dropped to his knees with a thud. One of the man's attendants barked. "Is this how you vermin welcome a sub-citizen officer?" Terrified, the townspeople immediately fell to their knees, faces pale and trembling. The man stood motionless, gazing down at the crowd with detached disdain, as if he were observing a pit of diseased lab rats. Then, cutting through the tense silence, came the sudden wail of a crying child. The boy's father panicked, scrambling to cover his mouth while dropping to his knees, stammering an apology. But it was too late. The man's boot had already lifted off the ground. He didn't stomp. Instead, he gently placed his foot on top of the crying baby's head. "Relax. Why would I kill my tax revenue?" he sneered. But the nightmare wasn't over. Glancing at the datapad in his attendant's hands, his tone grew cold. Your village's death rate seems unusually high. Could it be tax evasion?" Without another word, he pulled out a sleek handgun. Bang! 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 A burst of gunfire rang out. Bullets flew in a perfect circle around the mayor, neatly framing him as the epicenter. The man spoke calmly, as if delivering a weather report. "Today, every one of you, if just one person can last 5 minutes against my dog in combat, I'll approve your population count." The mayor trembled. This wasn't negotiation, it was theatrical cruelty. The attendant's control pad glowed ominously red. As he activated the combat mode, he casually reminded the dog, "Try not to kill too many this time." At that moment, a towering, heavily built cyborg stepped into the circle. The battle between man and beast was about to begin. One of the scrapyard's larger workers stepped forward without hesitation, volunteering to fight. But he clearly underestimated the creature before him. As the fight began, the worker raised both arms, his fists humming as they charged with kinetic energy. With a roar, he charged straight at the dog. But any creature chosen for a trial like this was no ordinary mutt. In a flash, the dog leapt high into the air, landing squarely on the worker's arm. Then it began darting between his limbs at blinding speed, moving so fast it was nearly impossible to track. Watching from the sidelines, Xiang Shan narrowed his eyes, instantly sensing something was off. "Of course," he muttered. "That's no regular beast." Back in the old days, humans were obsessed with biomechanical fusion, turning animals into lethal living weapons. Due to their small size and incredible speed, these biomechanical dogs inspired the creation of a specialized martial art, Bionic Fist. While the crowd was still gasping, the dog had already clamped its jaws around the worker's artificial blood vessel. With a savage tug, the tubing tore free from the prosthetic limb, causing the man to collapse unconscious. The defeat itself wasn't all that surprising, but when everyone looked at the timer, they were stunned to see that only 5 seconds had passed. The mayor tried to brush it off. It's fine. Artificial organs can be repaired. But who's up next? He turned to another burly man nearby. Desley, you're in. Amid reluctant cheers and peer pressure, Desley forced himself to step into the ring. Meanwhile, Xiangshan's expression had grown grim. This dog wasn't just fast. It had to contain a fully functional human brain. And not just any brain, a martial artist's. No one else could execute Bionic Fist with that level of precision and brutality. But before Xiangshan could finish his thoughts, Desley's blood tubes were already being ripped out by the dog. The timer? Another 5 seconds, exactly the same. No matter who stepped into the ring, the outcome never changed. 5 seconds. The mayor's face had gone pale. Even if all of us go in, we still won't last 5 minutes. Yuki stared at the beast in awe. So this is what real martial arts looks like. But Xiangshan roared, his voice shaking the air. This isn't martial arts at all. The martial arts he remembered, true martial arts, were never tools of oppression. They were born of resistance. A way for the weak to stand tall against tyrants, not to crush the helpless. As more and more workers fell, blood splattering across rusted metal, Xiangshan began to walk forward, one heavy step after another. Yuki rushed behind him, grabbing his arm in panic. You can't. That broken body of yours will fall apart the moment you fight. But Xiangshan shrugged him off like a ghost possessed, his pace unwavering, his eyes locked on the beast ahead. But just when everyone expected a heroic entrance, Xiangshan suddenly collapsed to his knees with a loud thud. Turns out, he hadn't volunteered. Someone had shoved him into the ring. From the sidelines, the tax officer stared at his mismatched prosthetics and muttered, "What is this performance art?" But under the weight of 100 stares, Xiangshan slowly rose to his feet. This feeling, this burning sensation in his chest, it felt strangely familiar. Memories from a past life began to surface. Only through combat could he bridge who he was with who he used to be. He exhaled and stepped forward. If it's a fight you want, then come. He knew damn well, with this wreck of a body, defeating that bionic hellhound was a fantasy. His eyes scanned the ground, then locked onto a fallen stun baton. That's my only shot. The dog, meanwhile, didn't even see him as a threat. With a savage snarl, it lunged straight for his throat, teeth bared, eyes locked on the kill. Just when everyone thought Yor was done for, the dog sank its teeth right into his exposed battery pack. But it turns out, being broken had its perks. The battery sparked violently, surging with raw voltage. In that split second, Xiangshan slammed his fist forward, sending the dog flying. He quickly realized this wasn't some mindless mutt. It had gone straight for his power source. It was aiming to end the fight in one bite. But before he could think more, that long-lost fire surged through his veins. This feeling. I've missed it. The dog recovered and lunged again, a blur of metal and fury. Xiangshan's left arm shot up and crashed down like a hammer. Thud! The beast hit the ground hard, limbs flailing, knocked flat on its back. Everyone watching froze. No one expected that pile of junk to hit like a war machine. Xiangshan didn't waste a second. His eyes locked onto the fallen stun baton. He reached for it, ready to finish this. But the dog quickly adapted, latching onto Xiangshan's left leg with its jaws and yanking backward with brutal force. Yet all it managed to do was slow him down. His prosthetic body couldn't even register pain. All external martial arts techniques, including Bionic Fist, had to obey Newtonian physics. According to its logic, disabling an opponent's legs came first. Xiangshan stomped forward with his right leg, regaining balance instantly. Based on the dog's shoulder height, no matter how strong it was, it couldn't destabilize a full-grown cyborg stance in a single tug. But then, in a sudden shift, the dog released his left leg and lunged straight at the right one. Xiangshan seized the moment. His right foot surged forward, aiming a brutal kick at the beast's exposed underbelly. But just as the strike was about to land, the dog defied all expectations. Its front limbs had been reinforced with weighted modules. Using the extra momentum, it dodged the attack, then launched into a rapid backflip and cleanly tore Xiang Shan's head clean off. The tax officer froze, blinking. What the? This junk pile fights like a martial artist. But I don't sense any internal energy. Could it be the corpse of a dead external-style master? The Dyson rule strictly forbids the killing of human beings, but the loophole? As long as the biological brain remains intact, everything else is fair game. In the blink of an eye, the man and the dog had already completed another brutal exchange. The dog narrowed its eyes. This pile of junk, it's reading my moves? But Xiang Shan didn't hesitate. He launched into a spinning sweep kick. It wasn't fast, but the timing was flawless. The dog was struck cleanly and sent soaring into the air. Seizing the moment, Xiang Shan dove down to grab the stun baton, but the force snapped his right prosthetic leg with a sickening crack. The dog landed and stood tall, eyeing him coldly. Didn't expect some backwater hick to put up a fight. As it spoke, its jaws slowly opened. From within emerged a steel helmet, sliding outward piece by piece. When the entire unit had been revealed, the crowd gasped in horror. It wasn't just a combat dog. There was a human martial artist housed inside. Xiang Shan froze, completely dumbfounded. A wave of nausea hit him, but then he remembered he didn't have a stomach anymore. The man burst into wild laughter, a voice booming like thunder. Tell me your name. Xiang Shan paused for a moment, then muttered calmly, My name is Xiang Shan. The mountain no one crosses. Well, it didn't give him time for dramatic pauses. His rear-mounted thrusters ignited with a rising hiss. Xiang Shan squared his stance, eyes locked forward. I'm a world-renowned martial artist. In the blink of an eye, Will launched forward like a missile, rocketing toward him. His front paw slammed down, aiming straight for the exposed battery on Xiang Shan's chest. At the same time, his jaws clamped down on the cyborg's arm. But he didn't notice the stun baton that had already been slipped under his thruster nozzle. A surge of electricity exploded through his body in a violent, crackling blast. And then, boom, a deafening explosion rocked the arena as the thruster detonated in a burst of fire and smoke. The explosion's shockwave blasted Will straight into the air, sending him crashing into the ground like a broken machine. Xiang Shan's battery, overwhelmed by the surge, fell from his chest and clattered to the floor. Paralyzed, he whispered through the static in his voice modulator, the title Xiang Shan of the Southern Peak. I fought with my life to earn it. Will lay twitching on the ground. No longer a threat, just a burned-out husk of what used to be a killing machine. The tax officer checked the timer in silence. Technically, the 5-minute challenge wasn't over, but the dog was clearly finished. He stepped forward slowly, and to everyone's shock, gently reconnected the battery into Xiang Shan's chest port. Xiang Shan stared at him, overwhelmed. It had been so long since he felt this victory. He wanted to cry, to scream, to let out the storm in his chest. But this body had no tear ducts, no vocal processor advanced enough to simulate sobbing. Even now, the hand he raised felt nothing. No warmth, no touch. The living, breathing body he once had was gone. What good was a brain without a soul to carry it? Xiang Shan pounded his metal torso with trembling fists, trying to vent the fury and despair boiling inside him. His mind flashed back to that battle, the battle he lost. It was my failure that doomed the world to become this. He clutched his head, curling into himself, repeating the same 3 words. I lost. I lost. He lifted his gaze toward the world around him, to the humans with steel limbs instead of flesh, to the monstrous tax officer who could end lives with a word, and to the proud martial artist who had become nothing more than a hound in a cage. The tax officer strolled forward, amused by the sight. You won the fight, yet look like you're about to cry. Pathetic. He had originally considered recruiting Xiang Shan, but now he wasn't so sure this broken man deserved the offer. Without a word, The tax officer walked over to Will's broken form, pulled out the stun baton, and casually plunged it into his core, executing him on the spot. Then he turned to the mayor. This year, we'll take 18 newborns as tax. The mayor blinked in confusion. 18? There were supposed to be 19. But with his lowly status, he dared not ask. He just stood there, stiff, afraid to breathe too loudly. Once the tax officer and his team departed, silence fell like a heavy curtain. The mayor stared at what remained of Will, a genuine martial artist corpse, discarded like trash. Xiang Shan finally stirred. He stepped forward, lifted the body onto his shoulder, and began walking through the crowd without a word. But he hadn't gone far before some greedy eyes gleamed. People tried to snatch away his spoils. Only this time, Xiang Shan didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He had faced down that dog, and something inside him had changed. Even Yuki could feel it. He muttered under his breath. Did he remember something? Xiang Shan motioned for Yuki to come closer, his voice low and serious. What I'm about to say, if word gets out, it won't just bring disaster to me and my mother. The entire town could be in danger. Yuki leaned in, eyes wide with anticipation. But just as he was about to speak, Xiang Shan hesitated. Forget it. I won't say anything. Yuki practically jumped in frustration. You can't just stop mid-sentence like that. That's torture. He chased after him, guessing wildly. Wait, did you remember you were some big shot? Or maybe you remembered an enemy, right? Am I close? Seeing how curious Yuki was, Xiang Shan sighed and gave in just a little. Tell me, have you ever heard the name Xiang Shan? To his surprise, Yuki simply shook his head. Nope, doesn't ring a bell. Xiang Shan blinked in disbelief. What? That name was given to me by my grandfather himself. It was supposed to shake the world. He muttered to himself, his voice faint. Has the age of awe already passed? Just how long have I been asleep? Still clinging to hope, Xiang Shan pressed on. What about similar names? Something like the mountain no one crosses? Yuki shook his head again. Nope, nothing like that. That answer hit Xiang Shan like a hammer. I used to be famous. The whole world knew who I was. Yuki looked at him skeptically. What? Were you like a Paralympic champion or something? Xiang Shan let out a bitter laugh. I don't know. I really don't remember anything. My declarative memory must have been offloaded somewhere. All I remember is my name and his. Suddenly, he grabbed Yuki's shoulders. Do you remember the name I shouted when I first woke up? Yurjimov? Yuki furrowed his brow, thinking hard. Yeah, you did say that name when you first woke up. But from the look on Xiang Shan's face, that wasn't the answer he wanted. He muttered to himself. So even he's gone? Have I really been asleep for thousands of years? I can't even remember who I was. Finally, he turned to Yuki and asked, Hey, what year is it right now? Yuki blinked. This year? It's 209. Yuki explained, there was a war during the Third Era. They called it the Ascension War. Xiang Shan's eyes widened. That war. So I've really been asleep for 200 years. And if I'm still alive, then the real Jorg must be 2. I have to uncover the truth. That night, Yuki brought Xiang Shan to visit a local doctor named Schultz. Xiang Shan hoped to upgrade to a more functional, combat-ready prosthetic body, but he lacked the parts. Dr. Schultz frowned. I've got some high-grade components, yes, but nothing comes free. Xiang Shan nodded, understanding the hesitation. Then he reached into his bag and pulled something out. It was a segment of spine, salvaged from the dog he had defeated. The truth was that dog had once been human, until it was modified with injected viral strands and fused with advanced gene-binding tech. Beings like that were known as Cyberians. Just like what happened to Yuki's mother, she ended up that way because she sold her spine. Are you seriously thinking of selling it? Yuki asked softly. You're not going to use it for yourself? There's no medicine, Xiang Shan sighed. You know, the stuff they use when replacing a spine. What was it called again? The doctor raised an eyebrow. You mean reverse Courier soak? Xiang Shan snapped his fingers. That's the one. So it's still called that in this era. But the drug wasn't the only thing he needed. He also required a ton of compatible parts. The doctor frowned. Those components you mentioned, way too ancient. Try checking the scrap pile at the parts yard. Or maybe look up some blueprints online. Xiang Shan stared at him, stunned. Wait, the internet. That died out during the war. You're telling me this wrecked world still has net access? Though clearly intrigued, he eventually declined. Forget it. Private network fees are a ripoff. After Xiang Shan left, the doctor crept into a hidden room and whispered into a transmitter. Mission failed. Xiang Shan refused to go online, no matter what I said. On the other end of the line, the mayor appeared on screen. His tone was grave. Violation of Dyson Principle, Article 3. Collusion between a Shaka and an outsider is punishable by death. That Shan, there's no doubt, he's one of them.